Hello and welcome to Global Connections. I'm Patrick Bratton on ThinkTech TV. I'm joined today with a very special guest, with Tim Wilson, who's in our graduate program of Diplomacy and Military Studies. Tim's had a very interesting career, a very interesting life, and so I'd like to talk to Tim about a lot of his adventures across the world. So, hello Tim, and welcome to ThinkTech.
Hey, Dr. Bratton, thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here and with the rest of the audience out there.
Excellent. So Tim, you are in our MA in Diplomacy and Military Studies program, and you're in a special program of that, the ACS program, right?
Right, so I'm in the program called Advanced Civil Schooling, and that's a program offered by the U.S. Army where they offer this opportunity to active duty Army officers to get a break from the grind and then also obtain their master's degree. At the same time, it also serves another purpose where it bridges the military and civilian divide. So it's good for both the civilian institutions as well as the military, because it reshapes them and furthers their education, and they come back into the force much stronger.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we've had several ACS students that I've had in the classroom over the years that I've been at HPU. Your case is slightly different, though, or your background is slightly different than the normal ACS student we get, right?
Correct. So I'm an active duty warrant officer, and so this is the first year they've offered it to warrant officers. Normally, it's a program reserved for captains or majors, usually within their mid-career level to senior level. So this is the first time they've opened it up to warrant officers, and I was fortunate enough to get selected. So it's a great program. It's been a great opportunity for me. The last time I sat in a college classroom was about 16 years ago for my undergrad, and so it's been a learning curve, from one end, but it's also been a great opportunity because I'm much more excited about it, and I dive into all the problem sets and just hungry for more, more information. So it's good.
Interesting. How long have you been here in Hawaii then?
So I've been here in Hawaii about 18 months before I joined the program, and then so now I'm here about 24 months, and I have about another year left till I finish the program.
Excellent. Okay. Where are you from originally?
So originally I'm from the Northeast, up in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. Later on in life, my family and we moved down to New York, New Jersey area, just outside of New York City, and then I went to school out in Western Pennsylvania. The small little Pennsylvania state school called Slippery Rock State University.
Slippery Rock?
Slippery Rock.
Slippery Rock.
Yeah.
Were there slippery rocks?
There actually was. It was. There's a little creek there that it was named after. The algae got on the rocks of the creek, and so they called it Slippery Rock. I know it's strange, but so yeah. Then after college, I joined the military and traveled all over. So
okay. What was your major as an undergrad?
So my major was sociology and a minor in psychology.
Okay. Were you always planning to go in the military, or were you kind of different things, or what were you?
So there was a lot of different things that I looked at. I looked at the business sector, I looked at law enforcement sector, and I'll never forget, I was at the University Union, and it was 1999, and so there was a military recruiter there, and he said, hey, we'll pay back all your college loans. And and I remember I had about $60,000 in college loans. So I said, hey, it's an excellent opportunity. I took his card, put it in my back pocket. And I'll never forget, I was commuting in and out of New York City looking for a job. And I was riding the New Jersey Transit in the PATH train into New York. And I looked around, and there were some guys just, probably in their late 40s, maybe early 50s, sitting in a chair in the train, reading a newspaper, drinking a beer out of a brown paper bag. And they just kind of looked miserable. They're just beaten down. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't think I want to be that guy in 20, 30 years. So. And then I had mounting student debt, so I joined the Army, and they paid off all my college loans. So,
wow.
And then it turned out that I loved what I did, being involved in a lot of stuff, traveling a lot, and so I stayed.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your MOS when you went in?
So when I first came in, I was enlisted. I was a what they call the 96 Bravo, an intelligence analyst. And then now they call it a 35 Fox, same thing, intelligence analyst. And I did that for about 6 years, and I worked with some really sharp officers. And because I had my bachelor's degree already, they encouraged me to go the an officer route, step out of the enlisted realm. And so I could have gone 2 tracks. I could have gone the regular officer track, or I could have gone the warrant officer track. And at the time, I thought I was a little bit too jaded for the regular officer track. So I went the warrant officer route, and plus I had really good mentors who were warrant officers, and they steered me in that direction. And I haven't looked back since. It's been a great opportunity. I love being in the Army. I love doing things for the Army, and it's a great organization, and the Army also takes care of its people too. So it's been no regrets. I mean, I just keep pushing forward because it's just been a wonderful opportunity so far. So.
And you've been stationed in many different places. I mean, Africa, Middle East. I mean, all over. Where are some of the places that you've been?
So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be in a lot of places. So I've been in Bosnia. So I worked out of Sarajevo. I've been in Kosovo, right in Pristina, Kosovo. I've been to various parts of the continent of Africa, working, whether it's exercises or enduring missions, and then Afghanistan. So done Afghanistan in Kandahar City.
Oh.
So the only campaign I hadn't participated in was Iraq. But for the most part, and I haven't done South America either. But for the most part, I've had a great opportunity. I've been to a lot of different locations, all over Europe, doing theater security cooperation exercises with various other European militaries. And that's always been a great opportunity because you get exposure to how European militaries do things. And, you forge good relationships and good bonds with people, and it's just fun. It's culturally, you see how they do things, and from being overseas for so long, you pick up on some of those cultural traits, and it definitely widens your aperture of how you see the world. So it's good.
One thing that always interests me, sort of in my research and some of the courses that I teach, is the different way different organizations, whether they're military or diplomatic, in different countries sort of do the same sorts of things, but in different ways. I mean, what was something for you working with, since you mentioned working with a lot of the European allies, something that was, wow, that's really, I mean, we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it really different. What would be something that?
Well, I would say we had a small mill-to-mill engagement with the Germans, and the way they did their field exercises, I mean, they had their own brewmeister, which I thought was phenomenal. I mean, U.S. military we shy away from alcohol while you're deployed or in the field and stuff, and it's good because of just having good order and discipline. So the U.S. Army shies away from that, but we were with the Germans, and they had their own guy that brewed their own beer, and he was their own cook, and so it was really fun because I'm sitting there and drinking nice fresh German beer and having good German soup for lunch and stuff like that. So kind of wish that would filter on over into the U.S. Army.
But it's a cultural thing we could probably be good for morale.
We could embrace that fairly well, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll take a short break. We'll hear about some other Think Tech shows that are going on, and we'll be right back with Tim.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech. This show is so very dear to my heart. We talk with artists of various different ilk here about the process that they go through for their art. So we talk about what they're doing, why they are doing it, how they do it. And it's a show that is inspiring. This is what I hear from people all the time. And a show that will teach you something, sometimes something about yourself. I hope you'll join us. The show is Center Stage. It's on Think Tech every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Aloha, my name is Carl Campagna. I'm the host of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. You can see our show every Wednesday at noon at 12 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, as well as visiting YouTube and finding the link for the show there. The show is also aired on OC16. We look forward to seeing you on the show. We have many wonderful guests, including Joan Husted, Corey Rosenlee, where we talk about the very important issues of education for our keiki. We look forward to seeing you there. Mahalo.
Hello and welcome back to Global Connections. I'm Patrick Bratton. I'm talking with Tim Wilson, one of the graduate students in our DMS program. Before the break, Tim was talking about a lot of the security cooperation and mill-to-mill cooperation that he did in places like Europe and Africa, and we were learning about some of the quality beer that the Bundeswehr has during their deployments. One of the things that's kind of interesting, this view perhaps has changed in the past couple of years because of sort of Putin's activities. But up until a couple of years ago, like if people said, security in Europe or military issues in Europe, I mean, that was almost people kind of scratched their head, right? Since the end of the Cold War, Europe's been very calm and peaceful. I mean, when you were there, some of the stuff you were doing, what were some of the issues that you were perhaps dealing with, or some of the security priorities or threats that people were looking at?
Well, that's true. Back, even as little as 3 years ago, the threat of Putin and Russia's kind of rising, if you will, that really wasn't there. I mean, it may have been a small concern, but the engagements that we were involved in were really just mill-to-mill engagements to conduct training, maintain relationships, and if you can fortify those relationships when there is an event, then they're already established. You know how your counterpart works. And specifically with NATO, having a lot of mill-to-mill engagements really that's the foundation of NATO, is to strengthen those ties and to maintain those relationships. So any type of theater security cooperation or a small level exercise just really reinforced those relationships. So in the event that there was ever anything, you were already established. So at the time, I don't really think anybody foresaw any issues between potentially what Russia might do or what Russia would do, go into Crimea or the Ukraine and stuff. It's been many years since I was in Europe working in the UCOM theater. So, but at the time and you did a lot of training in preparation for Afghanistan or Iraq, because we had a lot of people who part of the coalition, part of ISAF. They would rotate through there to train up before they went into Afghanistan or Iraq. So we would help in conducting those training missions as well.
Was that some of your links and experiences working in NATO and Europe, was that helpful for maybe some of the stuff that you did in Afghanistan with ISAF? Did you have interaction or?
So I didn't have much interaction. I had interaction with Brits, but we've always had enjoyed an ongoing good relationship with the British military, and I guess it prepped us to understand that other nations have different ways about doing things. Their militaries have their own military decision-making processes, and your way isn't always the right way.
Right.
They have other ways of doing things, which could be just as good as your ways of doing things. So, I would say in that regard, constantly working with other nationalities kind of set the stage for that. Not to be so rigid and working with other nations. So.
Would you say, that's one of the big benefits that we've had, sort of having alliances like NATO with a lot of this continuous training, operations, shared ways of doing things, sort of shared doctrine? Is that something that perhaps facilitated, some of the campaign in Afghanistan? Would you? Sure.
It's again, I go back to those relationships that we've had in a lot of the joint training we've conducted, and the ISAF coalition has been an integral part of the U.S. success in any of the operations conducted in Afghanistan or Iraq. So yeah, it's pretty vital to maintain those relationships and to be a strong member of NATO. So.
You mentioned earlier on Pristina. When were you in Pristina?
Oh man, that was probably about 2007. I would
Okay.
say. Yeah, not at the height of.
Not when the Russian paratroopers stole a march on us? And
No. No. It was just went down there for a security thing. We had a very small presence down there, and it was primarily maintained by NATO, but a small U.S. presence, and we would just go down for security consulting and just making sure everything was running smoothly. So, but it was fun. I mean, Kosovo was a pretty neat little place. It was at about the time where they were looking for their own sovereignty, So, but it's a fun place. It's an interesting place. I was there in the middle of the winter, so
Okay.
it was pretty cold. And then, we would, we went down to Macedonia a couple times, just driving down there to check out the area. So it was neat to get around, to transit between Kosovo and Macedonia, and just see the landscape, really. Skopje in Macedonia was an interesting place. But
I mean, what is it, the Eastern Europe in general, but particularly the Balkans, is often a place where it's very fashionable, sort of in other parts of Europe, to talk about nationalism being dead or nationalism being gone. But in the Balkans, nationalism seems to be sort of present. I mean, did you see that as much as like an outsider might think about, fervent Serbian or Kosovar nationalism and?
Yeah, actually I did. It was interesting. There was an old war memorial called the Field of Blackbirds, and my history might be a little off here. So, but this was during the Ottoman Empire, and where a battle had taken place, and so it was interesting because I had a Kosovar interpreter and kind of a guide, if you will, and he said, I'm not allowed to be here because it was Serb grounds, and so I got that sense that there's still that nationalist and still that rift going on. So it had to be very careful. He had to remain quiet because they would have picked up on it that he was a Kosovar Albanian as opposed to a Serb. So it was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a quote unquote holy place for the Serbs because of that defeat by the Ottomans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Did you? Silly question. Did you have a chance to eat those big Serbian hamburgers?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I did not, but I had some. We went to a small little restaurant, and it was like almost like a naan or a pita bread, and with goat cheese on it.
Burek?
I don't know what
Yeah,
it was.
yeah, burek,
It was pretty darn good, or whatever it was, and So and then just having the local Kosovo beer there. I think it was called Pivsko or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but no, I didn't have any of that, but it was good.
Okay, interesting. I spent a couple of weeks. We have a partnership relation at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia.
Oh, yeah.
So I taught in their College of Defense Studies for a couple of weeks, and one of the guys I worked with was Slovene, but of Serbian descent. So
Right.
he always had to take you out, and you had to have lots of meat.
Yeah.
They like Serbs like meat.
Yeah.
And so they have these huge hamburgers that are like the size of a hubcap. It's like huge. Interesting. So then you've also spent time around in Africa. I mean, Africa is another interesting one because 20 years ago, conventional wisdom is that the U.S. or the international community was not very interested in Africa, right? You would have these horrible things like the Rwandan genocide, and nobody would intervene and things like that. And there was a kind of this peacekeeping fatigue after Somalia and
Right.
Mogadishu and the U.S. military. But in the past 10 or so years, 5-10 years, I mean, Africa has really come sort of to the forefront of many different factors. I mean, we've got that as a pretty active front to the war on terrorism. We've got tremendous amount of Chinese interest in Africa and growing U.S. interest with the creation of this African Command a few years ago. Is that a shift that you've seen, this sort of sort of mini rebalancing in a sense, the U.S. kind of looking toward Africa?
A little bit. So I think we did that shift, established the Africa Command in about 2008 or 2009, and really and of course this is my take on it, not any official perspective, but it's they understood the vital importance of the continent of Africa. Rise in population, rise into the information age. It's it's a location to where it's untapped resources as far as markets go. It's vital to have good stability and good governance. That way they can grow. So it was going to be, or it was becoming another part of the global economy. So it was vital to have good governance and stability. And so AFRICOM's purpose was, again, in my opinion, not to establish a military command that's in charge of the area, but to enable security, to enable good governance, assist with nations in developing their military for their own border security, and so they can tie up any type of porous borders where there can be transnational groups going back and forth, and it's just really to strengthen the nations as far as in the various regions of Africa. I mean, Africa is huge. A lot of people don't realize, Africa is probably about 3.5 times the size of the United States. So when people say Africa, it's like, well, which part? Because it's just absolutely enormous. I think, just to kind of throw some out there, like the Darfur region in the Sudan is as large as the eastern seaboard of the United States.
Wow.
So it puts it in a perspective. So when you're talking about problem sets and areas, it's the tyranny of distance. It's absolutely enormous. So when you're trying to train or assist, it becomes logistically heavy, and a lot of planning is required to get down there to do any type of assistance.
Okay.
So,
We'll take another short break, talk about some of the other hosts and think tank shows that we've got going on, and we'll be right back with Tim.
Aloha, my name is Justina Spiritu, and I'm the co-host of Hawaii Farmers Series. This is my co-host, Matthew Johnson, and you can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. at thinktechhawaii.com. What do we talk about, Matt?
So on Hawaii Farmers Series, we're going to be bringing on the farmers and also supporter of farmers, including restaurants, caterers, as well as government supporters and nonprofits, to hear their background stories and understanding our local ag community just a little bit better.
Yeah, essentially there's a lot more that goes into farming and the local food community beyond just producing the food. And we want to feature and get the background story on all these folks and see how we all work together as a community. So join us every Thursday. Aloha.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
And it just got to the point where they expected my voice. It's fun.
All right, and we're back with Global Connections. I'm Patrick Bratton talking with Tim. Tim was talking about some of his experiences in Africa. One of the stereotypes that unfortunately has sort of persisted, I think, in the U.S. or in the West about Africa is like basically a continent of poverty, a continent that's been forgotten or is not developed or things like that. But in actuality, the reality of many of the different African countries is actually quite different. What you've experienced.
Yeah, so vastly different from country to country. There are some countries that are economically better than others, militarily better trained than others, have better governance and stability than others. I mean, Africa's known for its instances of coups taking place, and so that's always a concern with a lot of the less stable nations. But yeah, there's some areas that I'll never forget was where, trying to think of the capital, Kigali, Rwanda. I was trying to think of the capital. Kigali was a beautiful city, and there were some areas that have, heavy poverty, but there were some other areas that you thought you were in some posh neighborhood, very built up, very nice. And so there is a lot of concern between the haves and have-nots. I mean, the gap in between poverty and wealthy is absolutely enormous in some places. And then, there's some areas where you have still civil war going on. Like in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's still skirmishes going on over there. But for the most part, it's an excellent place to get out and travel. I mean, Kenya is a beautiful country. You get down into Tanzania, another beautiful country, and just tons and tons of stuff to see and do and travel around. But they're vastly different as far as their leadership, their military, their economies. Anywhere from North Africa, that's up near the Med, completely different than West or East Africa, and in South Africa for that matter. But it's a wonderful place. I mean, it's just so dynamic and different wherever you go. So.
What do you see as some of the major sort of pressing challenges for some of the countries?
I would have to say industry is a major one. Getting industry in there to kind of boost their economy, and some skilled labor. Politically, there's some nations have issues with coups, so it comes down to good governance and stability. And then, everybody equates a lot of African politics with corruption. So that's always a concern. And, it's hard to view corruption from a Western perspective because our definition and our terms and how we view it is vastly different than how they view it. Some of it is business as usual, and really it's part of survival as far as internal alliances between political parties and family name and tribe and culture and everything. So it's part of it could be a survival mechanism, or it's just their way of life. So our version of corruption is much different than theirs. So some of those things are obstacles when you're dealing with or you're analyzing or studying those areas. You have to look at it from a different perspective in order to actually fully gain that information. So, but I mean, the most pressing thing is I would say just a good economy and good governance. So,
is there a particular country or area that you fell in love with, or was your favorite place to have been?
I really enjoyed Kenya, and I really enjoyed Tanzania. Both of those were just a great place. Nairobi was, a fun city, and I liked Arusha, Tanzania. So I got to climb Kilimanjaro for a couple days. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal, and but anywhere you go is, I mean, it's what you make of it. Uganda was another fun place. Kampala, Uganda, and Burundi was a little dicey. It was nice, but it was a little dicey as far as you can almost feel the tension in the air. It was And then, ironically, I got Burundi's going through some
Right.
turmoil right now. So this was, oh man, this was back in 2009, and I could sense the tension in Bujumbura. So, but it was, everywhere I went was a fun place. So I look at Africa as kind of like the last of the Wild Wild West. You can go out there and do things and see things and have fun, and it's some of it's ungoverned territory, and you're just out there checking stuff out, and then some of it's built up, heavily populated cities. I do have to say is a lot of the local populace is very crafty. These guys, they can, there's a lot of their huts on the side of the road. They can make something out of nothing, building mopeds and scooters and cars and stuff like that. It's amazing how crafty they can be, and their ingenuity. They build something out of nothing. It's great.
Okay, interesting. So you spent time in Europe, spent time in Afghanistan, spent time in Africa. Now, for the first time, I think you said 16 years, you're back in the classroom.
Right.
Learning. What was, I've asked this before, other students who sort of had similar experiences to you. I mean, what's been perhaps both a good kind of pleasant surprise coming back to the classroom, and then maybe one that was a little bit more jarring coming back in the classroom?
Well, I get the pleasant surprise is just being able to study full time, and I forgot how fun it is, right? Because I've got a lot of hands-on experience, but I don't have a lot of the framework and the academic piece behind it. So it's been great to kind of get that strategic framework, that academic experience, and apply it to what I've experienced so far. So I was a little bit hesitant. I said, I'm going on 40 years old and I'm going back to college. I'm going to be in school with a bunch of young kids and stuff. But it hasn't been bad. I mean, it's been a mixture in the class. You got non-traditional students, men and women who are a little bit older. You have young students. They're pursuing their degrees. So it's really been a great experience. And I thank the Army for that because, I'm retooling my brain. I've thought one way for so many years, just approaching problem sets in one way. And now I'm getting it from the academic perspective. So I've kind of got to shift gears and retool my brain and how I approach things and really teach myself how to take in information and learn all over again. So it's a challenge, but it's fun.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
I look forward to when I graduate, though. I'm not gonna be I'm not gonna lie about it. I'll be happy when I'm done. So.
Okay, we won't see you as a perpetual student.
Maybe in another,
working on the third major or fourth major.
Not right now, no. Maybe when I retire in another 6 years or something, I'll pursue more, more of an academic research. But as of right now, I'll be happy to get out of here with alive.
Okay, good. I mean, speaking kind of like looking toward the end of your time, I mean, one of the things often I encourage students to do is try to develop a couple of specialities while they're in grad school. Normally one that's probably regional, is focused on countries or cultures, and another one on issue areas, whether it's terrorism or human rights or national law. I mean, and hopefully that will form some sort of basis for the thesis when you get done with the program. I know you're still pretty early on in the program. Right. You're not quite there in the thesis. I mean, you have some ideas about what you might be covering?
So, I'm toying with a couple ideas. Again, I really enjoyed working down in Africa, and I enjoy the problem sets that are down there because they are so vast. So I was contemplating on looking at transnational terrorism down in North Africa, and that'll help me both academically but also professionally in my military career. If depending on what my next assignment is, I wouldn't mind going back to AFRICOM and working problem sets there. So if I went that route, I think I would focus on transnational terrorism in North Africa. Again, that it would help me professionally. And then, if I don't go that route, I'm kind of stuck. I don't know exactly where. Maybe I look at theater security cooperation in Europe with the issues going on right now between Russia and Crimea. So there's a lot of potential. I just got to narrow it down right now.
Okay. One thing I'm always curious about is there are things that, as you're getting into the classroom, having seminar discussion, you're doing readings, are there things that you're like, hey, wait a second, I experienced something similar, when I was, in the field, or this reading or this concept maybe elucidates something that, I'd experienced, but maybe I didn't know how to,
Yeah. So in your class last semester for national and international security, I can't remember the name of the author, but he wrote on peacekeeping operations and how they don't actually necessarily designed around peacekeeping, where they might not be as beneficial as what they're intended to be. And he used Bosnia as an example.
Okay, right.
I can't remember the name of the author.
I think that was that Dick Betts on Puttering with Primacy?
Yes. Yeah. So, but it was interesting because he said a lot of our actions, all it did was led to prolonging the conflict instead of choosing a side and decisively putting an end to it. And it was an interesting take on it because, like I said, I was there and I did some of the peacekeeping missions, and I never viewed it as that from that perspective until I read his article. So I thought that was it's an interesting perspective. I mean, when I was there, I focused on crime and corruption and the various organized criminal elements that were in the Balkans. And which fed into the conflict and which the struggle between the sides. So that was interesting what Betts wrote. I never looked at it from that perspective. So
yeah, that's kind of contrary an argument that when you do peacekeeping or interventions, oftentimes you stop the conflict, like the actual shooting part.
Right.
But the actual root causes of the conflict might still be there, and then it actually gets prolonged in a sense because there's no victor in a sense in the war.
No victor, or there's just no definitive conclusion. There's no best victor. Is the best way to put it. Yeah. So Bosnia there was a lot going on, and between also persons indicted for war crimes, going after Milosevic and what was the other guy, Karadzic. So how the organized criminal elements would support their evasion, and so we're heavily focused on that. But again, it just seemed like it kept dragging out. And Betts made a valid point. I mean, you choose a side, put an end to it, and there's got to be one victor, there's got to be one loser. But until you do that, you're not going to definitively put an end to it. So,
when you were there, I mean, one of the things that came about in the 1990s is a lot of the sides that were fighting, instead of using their own military forces to do some of the more heinous things that were done, they would often contract out with these kind of mafia / sort of mercenary kind of guys like Archon and the Tigers and stuff. What's interesting is that, kind of after the war ends and people like Archon get mysteriously gunned down in front of cafes and things like that, we kind of stopped hearing about all these groups, right? And I mean, what happened to these groups? Were they still running around? Did they turn more into sort of a black market mafia kind of groups, or did they go someplace else where there was more violence?
So my understanding is they turned into that black market organized crime type element, in which they always had that kind of they always had that was always their motive, It's just target of opportunity, try to make some money. They may have had some ideology in the game as far as who they wanted to be the victor, but in the end, they were a criminal element, and that's kind of what we focused on. Is when I was there, what I did is the crime and corruption piece, and and also supporting the capture of persons indicted for war crimes.
Is this a phenomenon that we see in different regions, this sort of interesting nexus between, say, an ideologically motivated sort of political group like a terrorist group or something like that, with moving into sort of this sort of black market, organized crime, a sort of organization, a sort of nexus between these groups, do you see? Or?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these groups, they got to fund their campaigns, or they got to fund their cause somehow. And so some of them that are heavily ideologically motivated, they do some things where, you know, if they have successful attacks, they videotape them. If they have any type of success, they want to capitalize on that, because believe it or not, I mean, there's funders. I mean, they're backed and funded by somebody, and they have to prove to whoever's funding or backing them that they're a legitimate cause, that they're capable. But at the same time, they have to get funds from other sources. So it's black market smuggling, human smuggling, weapons smuggling. You saw that heavily across the Sahel in northern Africa. You know, ancient smuggling routes, and guys would, you know, they would do anything from smuggling tobacco and salt to human smuggling, or you would see kidnapped for ransom. You know, there was, I guess, the AQIM in the Sahel, formerly, you know, GSPC, LIFG, all those old groups, now AQIM. You know, they did kidnap for ransom in northern Africa, and so it was just a way to you know, fund their cause.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, we could continue talking about that, but we're out of time. But fascinating stuff. We were joined today with Tim Wilson, a graduate student at HPU, and also a warrant officer in the U.S. Army. He was talking to us about some of his experiences, both in the classroom and beyond. Thank you for coming, Tim.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Bratton.
Thank you much.
All right.
All right, and I'm Patrick Bratton with Global Connections at ThinkTech TV. Thank you to Jay, Zuri, and Nick, and the whole ThinkTech team. I look forward to talking with you next week.